Hi guys, welcome to my studio. I actually meant to do this video at the start of the year, but I was away touring and I've only just got back and really sort of got my shit together. So it's a slight belated video, but I wanted to start the year by doing a little tour of my studio. I got loads of questions from you guys about the equipment that I'm using and how I'm using it and what my favorite bits are. So I thought I would give you a tour of my current studio setup, as it is always evolving. But talk you through some of the equipment that I'm using at the moment, and why I'm using it, and also how I integrate it into my workflow. So we're going to start by spinning you around and showing you my small but very productive live corner. So for those of you who have heard my music, you'll know that I really like to use live percussion in my sounds. So I've been building this small arsenal of percussion instruments for the last year or so. I don't know about you, but I always used to find myself trawling through sample banks and loops and stuff to try and find that perfect shaker or that perfect percussive sound, and I still do that, to be fair, but I also now have access to my own sound, and there's something quite special about grabbing a mic and recording your own sound, something that's unique to you. It really helps to impart a certain part of your personality, your character, gives you that emotional and physical connection with your music, and you often end up with happy accidents as well, which are often the best things in music. Down here I've got a pair of bongos. Most of this stuff I picked up on Facebook, actually, Facebook Marketplace, secondhand stuff, so these sound really cool, and I've used them loads, and some brushes to play with. This is a cajon. It's got these wires behind the faceplate here. It's sort of like a snare, and depending on where you hit the board, you get different kind of timbres and tones and stuff, so it's a really really beautiful instrument. I love using it. We've got some shakers up here. These are some wooden shakers. These are plasticky, very cheap, but they just sound really, really good. And behind here, I think it's kashiki, I think this is the pronunciation. Got coconut shells on the bottom, really good for that really top end stuff. And I try to buy shaker instruments in pairs as well, because I love to record the top end percussion in stereo. You get that slight difference between the left and the right recordings, and when you pan those out, you get a really wide stereo field, and it really sounds really nice. Up here is my latest acquisition. I bought this back from Tulum and I just returned. Really cool sounding drum. It fitted in my suitcase as well. I haven't actually had a chance to record this yet, so I'm looking forward to having a play with that. And this is my big djembe. I actually used this on my next release, which is coming out in a few weeks on Crosstown Rebels. It's called Walls of Zion, and I used this drum as the main sort of groove element in the percussion. So yeah, if you want to listen to it, you can hear it there. It actually sounds completely different to this though, because I pitched it down an octave and did loads of other weird stuff with it. But that's the fun thing about production. You can start with a raw sound and take it anywhere you want. There's no rules. Up here I've got the microphones that I'm using to capture these. This is the main one I'm using, the Neumann TLM 102, which is a condenser microphone. Beautiful microphone. I use it for vocals as well, not my vocals because I can't sing, but anytime I have someone in here who can sing, I use that mic, and I'm using it to record the drums as well, because it captures all the detail in the top end. You get loads of texture. It's a really, really lovely mic. And I've got a workhorse mic here, the Shure SM57. And what I tend to do is, when I'm recording something like the djembe, I'll mic up the skin with the condenser Neumann microphone, and then I'll mic up the bottom of it. I'll show you here, which is where the bass comes out, the low end, with the Shure. And that way I've got both parts recorded, and I can mix them all together in the final mix down. So yeah, that's my live corner. Let's spin around and have a look at some of the synths that I'm using. Okay, so over to my small collection of synths, ever growing. You tend to get quite addicted once you start buying them, but yeah, I think starting up here is this is the Moog Sub 37, very popular synth, probably seen it in loads of studios. It was the first hardware synth that I bought, and I think coming from the digital side, using VSTs and virtual synths, the difference I found was the physical connection. A bit like, you know, the percussion. As you can see, there's lots of knobs and buttons and modulations, and you can really get hands-on, and I found that playing the instrument and tweaking all these parameters was a much more expressive way of getting sounds out of, that I wanted to use, more so than diving in and using modulation lanes and using sort of automation in the DAW, which is obviously still a really powerful way of doing things. But yeah, I just seem to prefer this sort of more expressive way of recording a sort of a long stem and playing around and getting some happy accidents again, and using those sounds and chopping them up. So it's got a really cool core sound. I've built some presets for it, which I sort of tend to use as my bass starting point, and then go from there. I think the thing about hardware as well is that once you get to know the instrument, you work out, you know, what its strengths are and where the sweet spots lie, and you can exploit those and use them in your music in a way that you want to. And I've definitely done that with this instrument. I've had it for a while now, and I know how it sounds. I know when to use it. So below that we've got this, which is another Moog synth. This is the Moog Matriarch, and it's a semi-modular synth, which this is an analog synth, but it's digitally controlled, so all the modulation routings are sort of under the hood in the menus, whereas this is all sort of laid out in front of you, which is it's a really quick way of working once you get your head around it, because you can use these patch cables to sort of you know, reposition and readjust the architecture of the signal flow, and get really creative with these sounds. But it also has just a fantastic core sound as well, and I think that's the starting point for any synthesizer. You know, it's all great to have loads of bells and whistles and effects and things you can do, but you know, if the core sound doesn't sort of connect with you initially, then you may be fighting a losing battle there. Some may disagree. You know, you can deep dive and create other sounds as well, but I like to feel an instant connection with an instrument. Over here we have the Vermona Performer, another really nice analog synthesizer. It's a desktop synth, so no keyboard, but you can plug one in, or you can use it with a MIDI controller or a sequencer. Quite a different sound and tone to the two Moogs. I think you can get quite dark sounds from those, and from this I really like to use it for the top end and melodies. It's got a beautiful sort of mid-range and top end, really sort of sparkles, and it's quite clean sounding, which sometimes is really nice to have. It's also a mono synth, but it's got 4 individual synth voices, and they can all interact in different ways, which makes it quite a unique synthesizer. I tend to use it quite a lot for melodies, because you can run a part through it, and you can set it so each note of the melody plays on a different voice. You can have a different filter setting for each voice. You can have a different envelope, different LFO, even a different wave shape, and you get to sort of really create these interesting textures that are ever evolving with your melodies. It keeps things really interesting, and obviously with all the knobs and buttons you can tweak away forever and just keep playing and playing. I love creating really long parts with this, and then chopping it all up and using it in my music. A couple of effects boxes that I'm using. This is the Fairfield Circuitry Shallow Water pedal. It's sort of a random pitch modulation pedal, and you can get sort of fluctuations in pitch, kind of the thing that you might get sort of wow and flutter from when you're using tape. And also you can run a really hot signal into it and you get some really nice distortion. I've used it on synths and I've used it on guitars as well. It really does add some cool character. The only thing I don't like about it is the fact that it's mono, and it sort of stops me using it as much as I should. There is a kind of workaround that you can do. I've run like a synth part through it, and you get all the modulation from the pedal, and you do a little bit of performance on the synth, and then you run the same part through it, and because the pitch modulation is random on that, it's slightly different. The performance is slightly different, and then you can pan each one left and right, and you can get a stereo effect from using that mono pedal. So a bit of a workaround, a bit more effort, but when I do it, it is worth it. This is the Dr. A from Audio Thingies. It's a reverb and delay in one, and yeah, it's just a really nice sounding reverb. I love the reverb. It's got 4 different settings for different kind of halls and plates, and different delays, ping pongs, tape delays, digital delays. Yeah, and I've got this always hooked up to one of the sends on my desk, so I can send any of my outboard synths or any of my tracks in Logic straight to it, and I can use this as an effects box. Okay, let's talk about the desk. I guess you would say that this is sort of the hub of my studio. It's the Allen & Heath GSR 24M analog console, and it's also got a 32 channel audio interface built into it. So it was really designed as a hybrid console, something that works in the analog domain, but also interacts seamlessly with the digital environment. I've got all of my synths, all of my instruments, all of my mics wired in and ready to go, which is just really, really helpful because I don't want to spend time faffing around plugging things in or setting things up. You know, it just kills the workflow. So everything's here, plugged in, ready to go. And at the same time, with the flick of a couple of switches, I can send any of my tracks out of Logic through this board and run them out and then send them off to any effects and then record them back in. It's got 24 channels, 24 mono channels, it's got 2 stereo channels, and it's also got these 2 valve channels, which are really cool for recording stems back in if you want to get a bit of color or a bit of saturation. I've really enjoyed the workflow, and I think that's the key thing about having a console in the studio. You know, it's not to everyone's taste, not everyone has the space or even wants to use one, but I find that it's the workflow that really makes the difference. It's got 6 sends on each channel, and that enables me to send audio out of the digital environment, as I said, and process it in the analog world. So I've got my tape machine set up on sends 1 and 2, so I can send anything out and record that to tape. I've got my Audio Thingies reverb and delay box sends out on 5 and 6. So I can send everything there, and I think I've got 2 spare actually, so that probably means I'm going to buy something pretty soon. But yeah, I've been working with it now for nearly a year, and I love the workflow. It's really also helped me when I do my live performances. On my YouTube channel, I always do live versions of my tracks, and having all of these outputs available means that I can send out stems from Logic and run everything across the board, but I can still have my live instruments going as well. And it really helps me to piece everything together. And because of the 32 channel interface, I can record all those stems separately, and then that obviously gives me a lot more freedom in post-production. This little beauty sitting in the corner is the Nord Drum 3P. It's a modeling percussion synthesizer. And obviously there's loads of drum synthesizers, very famous ones, 808s, 909s, etc. But there aren't many that I've seen that really focus on percussion instruments. And this is quite a unique sounding instrument. It's all synthesized drums, so that gives you a lot of freedom to tweak and to craft your own sounds. I often use it a lot for top end elements. It's got some really cool snares and drums, and it's also just got some really weird sounds in it that I haven't really heard anywhere else. So it's really cool. It's nice to play as well. You've got obviously these touch sensitive pads that you can play with your hand or you can hit with sticks, and it's a really cool little thing to just have sitting here plugged in. Anytime I want to find a little bit of inspiration, I just whack away at those pads and record something, and something cool always comes out of it. Okay, so this is the last little section of my studio, which is my rack, and up here I've got the only piece of vintage gear in my studio, which is the Tascam 244 Porter Studio 4-track tape machine. I managed to pick this up off of eBay for a good price and found someone to refurbish it, bring it back to its glory days, and it's a really cool, fun thing to have and to play with. You know, there's something quite special about the sound of tape, and to be able to send things out of it. I often send synths out of it, and use the little pitch knob here to slow the tape down and to get that pitch warble or pitch shift sound, and it adds a certain thickness to the sound that I just don't think I've managed to get from the plugins. I often use percussion as well. Pitching down percussion on this is really, really cool. You lose a lot of the clarity and the sheen of the sound, but what you lose there, you gain with sort of just character and vibe. And I tend to use it in parallel, so I'll take the original recording send it through here, record it back, and then I'll mix that in with the original recording. So I keep, especially with percussion, like the transients and the clarity, but you get to mix in that character as well. So it's a really fun tool to have and nice to experiment with. This rack here is sort of the end of the process for me. So I'll send my stereo track, my mix down out of the console via the groups. This comes in as a send effect on the groups. Sorry, not a send effect, it comes as an insert effect on the groups. And it comes here at the start. This is the GainLab Audio Empress. It's a stereo EQ, a 3-band EQ, and it's sort of got a nod to the Pultex because you can boost and cut simultaneously at the high and low bands. Really nice sounding EQ. Coming down here is the IGS Audio Tube Core stereo mastering compressor, which also works in mid-side mode, which is a really nice way to process and to do compression on a mix bus. And then finally is the SSL Fusion, which is a really popular piece of hardware that's been popping up in studios ever since they produced it. And it's kind of got a bit of everything. We've got a bit of vintage drive here. We've got a 2-band EQ, a high frequency compressor, and some stereo width widening here. So it's the kind of the final piece in the puzzle after it's been through the EQ and compression here. If I need to even anything out or boost certain things to finalize the project, it comes out of here and then it goes recorded back into the DAW. And this here is just it's a piece of DJ kit really. It's a Vermona high pass and low pass filter. It's not really made for the studio, but I keep it in my rack, and yeah, I don't really use it that much anymore because I haven't got decks in my studio. So, but yeah, it's nice to have, and I probably will find a way to use it eventually. So that just about wraps up the studio tour. I'd just like to finish off by saying, you know, expensive hardware and equipment is a luxury, not a necessity. I've been making music for over 15 years now. I started off in my mum's kitchen. I've been inside bedrooms, corners of the living room, dark and dingy garages, and all of that time, you know, on just a laptop and some cheap headphones. So I wouldn't want anyone who is just starting out or just looking to get into music production to think that you need to spend all this money to make great music. You don't at all. Great music comes from within, and so you just have to use the tools you have at your disposal. Okay, I hope you found this interesting, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. I will do my best to answer them.